What is going on, Only Playbook fans? We are back for another episode. My goodness, if you are an NFL lover, this past week or 2 weeks has been Christmas, Strovid. I can't even think of a better comparison. There have been so many moves, so many things happening for each team. Maybe not as much for some teams, depending on what you want them to do. But for my team, there's been so much happening. So I'm very excited to talk about it along with the rest of the NFL. Strovid, how are you feeling heading into free agency and heading into the draft with the Steelers and kind of the landscape of the NFL as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Steelers are doing just enough to kind of push the thread a little bit to get the players that they need, the playmakers, like especially the DK Metcalf signing. That was huge. We also got Kenneth Gainwell, who really torched us during the Eagles game towards the season. So I like what they're doing, and then we just need to address the quarterback situation. So that's been good from a Steelers standpoint. And NFL as a whole, man, this is the time to just keep up with the notifications. You get every blockbuster trade, all these things that are happening right now. It's just exciting time. So, and I can't wait to start talking about the fantasy implications of all this in the later seasons or episodes, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, dude. Once draft happens, we can flesh out the full rosters for every team. Then we can really dive into what the fantasy implications of that's going to be. Obviously, taking it step back from a kind of a bigger lens, if you will, just who we thought, what teams, players, if you will, won in free agency and what teams, players lost in free agency, risers, fallers, however you want to kind of navigate this. But there are teams that have hit home runs, that have really attacked what they need and have been big spenders with the money that they have. And then there have been teams that have just been sitting on the side, even while they have money, waiting for things to happen. And so we just really want to dive into all that and flesh out the landscape of the NFL as we see it here today, Sunday, March 16th. So again, like you said, a big domino to fall, still quarterback for the Steelers, quarterback for the Giants. So there's still things that can shake up how this finally plays out in the end. But as of now, again, a lot to talk about, Shobit. So I'll let you kick it off. Give me your first winner.
Yeah, so my number one winner is going to be the Chicago Bears. First off, signing of offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, that was huge. We already knew that was going to happen towards the end of the playoffs last year, but he's just a creative mind, and what he did for the Lions really excelled them to be one of the greater offensive teams that we've seen from the Detroit Lions standpoint. So that was really good. He also needs a good pass blocking and rush blocking system as well. And they actually, address that, really allowing for more time in the pocket for Caleb Williams. We really need to see Caleb Williams in the second year have that time and not be rushed to make these throws that we know that he can do. And so I think this will allow him to be the best version of kind of what we're used to seeing back in the USC days. And we'll see that hopefully this year with the Chicago Bears. And they also get defensive tackle Grady Jarrett, and they addressed the edge rushing issue with Daya Yingbo. So that was really good. I think, addressing the trenches, both on the offensive side and defensive side, really sets the tone for this team moving forward. So I really like what they did, and the signings are going to prove fruition, I think, throughout the season next year.
Yeah, it's really important that they had a clear direction, because like you said, last year they drafted arguably what they thought was the best quarterback in the draft, and he came into a system where you had a defensive minded head coach, and you didn't really have an offensive play calling or offensive style that would really fit his strengths, right? And now we're kind of in an interesting situation, because Ben Johnson turned Jared Goff and that offense into like such an efficient nightmare, if you will, right? Utilizing the run game, the play action, and Goff's not. We don't sit here and consider Goff a top 10 quarterback, but Goff's ability to play within structure of that offense was really good, like really, really good. So it really begs two different questions for me is they are doing everything they can. They brought Caleb a offensive mastermind in Ben Johnson. They are fortifying his offensive line. They're giving him every opportunity to succeed in year two. It's just going to be about, again, Ben Johnson's offense is so set on timing and rhythm, and Caleb Williams's offensive skill set is so predicated on off script stuff, right? So I think it's going to be one side is going to have to give in, and obviously in this situation, I think it's going to have to be Caleb Williams. He's going to have to give in to fit into this offense. So it's going to be really interesting. The pieces are all there for him to succeed. The excuses are going to have to be minimized, because again, they're overhauling the offensive line. I wouldn't be surprised if they if imagine if they get Ashton Ginty, like what are your excuses? At that point, your offense is insane. So they're going to be in the market for a running back, and I wouldn't be shocked if they draft another receiver or even fortify the offensive line that much more. So I think they're going to go into the draft even already attacking so much of the offense by doing more for Caleb. So I don't think year 2 Caleb's going to have any shortage of weapons, protection, all that. So I really don't think there's going to be excuses. And you're right. They did everything they needed to do to build around a young quarterback that they're, pretty much bestowing their franchise upon and hoping that he can lead them to the promised land. So you have to we sat here last year too in the offseason. I remember talking about how the Bears won the offseason, and then we saw kind of the product that was put on the field, and it was pretty ass. So it's really easy to do the same, but I just think it's hard to build overnight, right? It's hard to build success overnight. They made a lot of trades last year to fortify defensive positions with the linebackers that you're like, oh, you're trading and paying for non-premium positions on the defense. Well, slowly but surely they matriculated. They brought in Montez Sweat. So they're slowly building. They have Jalen Johnson. So they have really cornerstones at all 3 levels. And now they're just plugging and playing and fitting in little pieces like veterans, Grady Jarrett, stuff like that can mix and mesh well with their young core. So, dude, it's, I drank the Kool-Aid of the Bears last year because I was all in on Caleb Williams. It's hard not to drink the same Kool-Aid knowing that year 2, he should naturally take a step, and they're doing everything they can to protect him both offensively. And there's no world, but I don't think that defense should be a top 5 unit in the NFL. So the Bears are damn scary, man, especially in a loaded NFC North.
Right.
All right. So for me, my biggest winner here, it's going to sound so homerish, like I'm drinking this goddamn Kool-Aid for my favorite team, but I think you'll be able to back me up on this. And it's impossible to not sit here and talk about all the good that the Minnesota Vikings did. I mean, they have already spent the most money in the offseason so far of any team. They have completely overhauled their offensive line. Okay. Let's just talk about structurally. Last year, 14-win team with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, no longer a quarterback. He's gone. He went to the Seattle Seahawks, right? Sam Darnold's biggest issue was our interior pressure, our center and our guards completely getting blown up all the damn time. We have bookend great tackles, but our interior offensive line has been a problem for Kirk, for Sam for the last 4 or 5 years. And we've always tried to patchwork it. Like, let's bring in a random one-year guy, he can fit in fine. And it never worked out well. And finally, we go out and get center Ryan Kelly from the Indianapolis Colts, played his whole career there. He's been a stud, and he's going to fortify that unit and really be the leader. And the plan is to cut Garrett Bradbury or trade him, right? So you're already overhauling by taking out your leader on the offensive line, essentially your center, the guy that's coordinating everything, and bringing in a veteran who's already done that for a decade. So Ryan Kelly, and not only that, they bring along his guard, his teammate, Will Fries, who again is a up-and-comer 26, 27-year-old who is kind of coming into his own as an elite guard. So you're buying stock on a guy who is ascending at the right time, and you're signing him for 4 or 5 years to fortify that interior. So you have 2 guys along the interior. You already have 2 like bookend tackles, Darisaw, who's an all-pro, O'Neal, who's an all-pro. So 4 of your 5 offensive linemen show it all of a sudden are like top 10 in the league or better. And that's incredible, right? Now let's pair that with the fact that they brought back Aaron Jones, and he was good for them. But what they said was they didn't want him to be the workhorse. Well, just yesterday, Shovit, in kind of a surprise splash trade, they go out and they get Jordan Mason from the 49ers, a amazing zone runner, similar to the type of concept that the Vikings run, that zone running scheme. And he averaged 5.3 yards a carry for his career. So he is a very successful downhill runner, specifically in the same scheme that the 49ers and the Vikings tried to emulate with each other. So I think this is a perfect fit, a perfect complement to Aaron Jones, who shouldn't see a full workload. But now you have Jordan Mason, who can be your first and second down workhorse. And then you have Aaron Jones, who can be the pass catcher and the pass protector on third downs. And all of that to say, they also fortified their defense. They brought in 2 defensive tackles to create pressure, generate pressure from the interior. They re-signed Byron Murphy Jr., and they signed Isaiah Rodgers on the outside. So you look, and they brought back Harrison Smith. So you look around this team. If I had to ask you, Shovit, from your perspective, where do you see a weakness with the Minnesota Vikings right now?
Yeah, I mean, it looks really good. And when we talked about the Chicago Bears fortifying that trench and really making the offensive line and defensive line really well, they do that with these signings that you just mentioned: Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Will Fries, and Ryan Kelly. That's the pressures that, just looking at the next gen stats, they average about 7.8 pressures. You're looking like a boost to 9.3 pressures per game for the Minnesota Vikings. So already on the defensive front, you're doing really well. We talk about the offensive line. You're giving a better. So Will Fries has a run block rate of 93%, adds approximately 0.3 extra seconds also of pocket time on the passing game. So, that great job on the trench. I think the only gap I would say is maybe on the cornerback position, right?
Yep.
Your cornerback. So you get Bynum, I believe, or you release.
No,
Bynum.
so we lost Bynum. We re-signed Byron Murphy Jr.
Right. So Byron Murphy Jr., solid cornerback to pick up. Cam Bynum is also really good, and I think that he's, if you could have got both of them, I know Cam Bynum was looking to get paid as well. That would be the only issue I would say, like on the cornerback position that you might want to address with the draft. But all around, you can't really address every single thing, right? So you have your quarterback of your future. You got the trenches built. You got the receivers and JJ and Addison, the tight end, the running back. I would say now just a cornerback position, which Brian Flores is a great defensive mind as well. So he could work with the personnel that you have. So it's got to be an exciting time to be a Vikings fan, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on. That's the one area that I would say if we could still potentially draft a first-round player or trade back, because at this point we only have four draft picks, and I know they're going to try to back in and fill in the roster to give us some depth. Cornerback is still there. So kind of two things that I think could happen here. You brought back Byron Murphy Jr. Like you said, he's more of a nickel cornerback, right? Like I think that's where he succeeds the most. So let's say he's playing your nickel. You went out and signed Isaiah Rodgers. Now he was a part-time player for the Philadelphia Eagles that came in because of some injuries, but he is a boundary corner that, because of how good Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean had been, they were hella targeting him when he came onto the field, and he held his own. So in limited snaps, he truly felt like a good boundary corner, and I think they took a chance on a young guy. You didn't have to pay him as much, and he has the ability, like you said, Flores props up his players in his system, so you can elevate a guy like that to potentially be a better player. And then we have Mekhi Blackman, who we traded last year, or who we drafted last year, who's going to come back from injury. So you have three guys, and I'm with you. I still don't feel completely fantastic about this group, so that leads me to believe either we're going to draft a cornerback young in the first or second round, or similar to last year, late into the offseason, when you're kind of filling out the final pieces of your roster, they brought back like a Stephon Gilmore, or they signed like a Shaq Griffin, right? So they still have the ability to bring one veteran cornerback presence in to really lead that locker room or lead that cornerback group. And then they draft one. And like you said, at that point, you truly have basically filled the holes for all of your weaknesses. So it's just really, really exciting to be a Vikings fan. It was for 4 or 5 years, we were 14 wins last year, but financially not in the best spot. Quarterback still uncertain given the last 2 games that Sam Darnold played. And now it seems like we're shifting into the JJ McCarthy era, and we're giving him every single tool to be successful. And I think that's what I love the most about what the Vikings have done. They're going all in on their young quarterback.
Yeah. And I think the thing about the approach that they took is, I like when teams focus on their defensive line. And so, even if you have decent cornerbacks, you don't have to have that lockdown corner, right? Because there's just not enough time for the ball to be thrown out with all these new personnel and strength in the defensive line, kind of like what the Eagles did back when they were playing the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl. They lost, unfortunately, but that team was structured around a solid defensive line, and so that's what we're seeing with the Vikings. So that's also a plus on these signings as well, even if they didn't address the cornerback 2 per se.
Yeah, and you're right. That's how you mask coverage, right? Is you create pressure so the boundary corners and the backside doesn't have to cover as long. You have Jonathan Grenard, I think it was top 10 in pressures. You have Andrew Van Ginkel, who can hold his own. Daniil, why am I drawing a blank on our first round? Dallas Turner, who we drafted, who only played seldom snaps, is going to come into year 2 as a pass rush specialist. And now the place that we weren't getting pass rush, Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen are pass rushing defensive tackles, right? Typically you have a defensive tackle and you think he's some fat guy that's going to stop the run. Well, they didn't get that. They got 2 guys that are pass rushing defensive tackles. So yes, that pressure rate's going to go even higher. Brian Flores isn't going to have to blitz as much as he did last year. So that's going to allow more players in the secondary to cover, to mask your lack of having a true top tier, like, CB1, if you will. So again, really, really hard to not be impressed with everything they've done. Again, really exciting times to be a Vikings fan from that standpoint. But let's talk a little bit on the sadder side. Shove it, some losers. Who do you have as your biggest loser in free agency so far?
Yeah, my biggest loser is going to be, I'm pretty sure this was my biggest loser last year as well, and we're just going to keep going with this. It was the Dallas Cowboys, right? And so let's talk about their signings that are maybe key that you might want to think about is Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, which I'll get to that in a little bit. But their key loss is going to be two. One is Zach Martin on the offensive line, and then the other one on the defensive line, DeMarcus Lawrence, right? What DeMarcus Lawrence came out and said, the Dallas Cowboys, Dallas is
crazy,
but I will never win a Super Bowl with the Cowboys and this feud with Micah Parsons. I mean, it's true, right? That place, the Dallas is a shit show in itself. And so that has to be something where if free agents are looking in Dallas and thinking of signing, it's like, well, you know what? If it's not the right money, I don't want any part of it. A la like Cooper Kupp, right? Who is considered going to the Cowboys as well. In terms of their signings, right? Javonte Williams, Miles Sanders, it just kind of like goes back to this Jerry Jones thing, right? Like he's the GM and he's making these decisions to sign two running backs who Miles Sanders wasn't a starter, but he signed with the Panthers as a starter. Javonte Williams did well until he had the ACL injury, and he didn't really come back to himself, what we saw prior to that injury, right? So you go out and get these running backs who really have improved themselves in their previous stint with their previous teams, and you're looking at a draft market where like it's running back galore. You can get really good prospects and work with them and build on them, and you go out and sign these guys. Now you can have a lot of running backs, and there's always room for more. But it's the opportunity cost when you sign these players. I don't think that they made any headway on their team to kind of make their team better in any sense, and their strategy just does not come off as like, oh, okay, we know what we're doing. Losing these top guys, DeMarcus Lawrence, Zach Martin, to obviously, being retired, that's a whole different story. But I don't think they could have got some of these other offensive lines that we've talked about, and so it's not a significant new talent for Cowboys to be anything with an aging Dak Prescott. Like, how many more years can you get of this quarterback, right? So that's my concern with the Cowboys.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. They are massive losers, and it doesn't matter that we brought him up last year. The theme here is Jerry Jones's inability to spend, right? I mean, you talk about a guy who is a fortified billionaire. He's one of the richest owners we have in football. The Cowboys are one of the most profitable franchises, despite how bad they are and how inconsistent they've been over the last 2 decades. But when you think of these signings and the players they bring in, it's like, to me, bargain bin shopping, right? You're too scared to pay premiums on good players that you're like, we want to try to swing for low risk, potentially high reward players. And that works out like 1 out of every 50 times. So it's impossible to try to build or construct an entire roster with a bunch of bargain bin players who you hope you're going to see the best of their abilities when you sign them. I mean, that's just not realistic. So, and like you said, Dak Prescott, he is the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. He's taking up the largest cap space of any quarterback in the NFL. Josh Allen just signed a hella max extension, still not getting paid as much as Dak Prescott. Let that sink in. So from a roster construction standpoint, what can the Cowboys do? Like, they should sign players, but if you sign 2 more premium free agents, you basically have 3 players taking up 50 to 60% of your cap space. And at that point, how can you construct a roster? They don't have a secondary weapon behind CeeDee Lamb. Who is Dak throwing the football to besides CeeDee Lamb, right? Like you said, I guess they're not bringing back Rico Dowdle, so their replacements has been Miles Sanders and has been Javonte Williams. So it's like, you could have just saved that money, maybe put that into the trenches, and then use one of your draft picks, like you said, to go out and draft a better running back, a younger running back that's going to cost you less because you drafted him. So it is a real head scratcher. I don't think we're going to be surprised for as long as Jerry Jones owns this team at the lack of moves that they make or the head scratching moves that they do make. It's been a theme, and they're really not putting themselves in any position to get better. They're, like you said, they lost Zach Martin, that one of the best guards of all time, right? All time. So you can't just replace that without trying to. So like, what are they trying to do there? So I don't know, man. You have the highest paid quarterback. You're not surrounding him with enough talent on the offensive line in the skill positions, and you only lost on the defensive side, and you haven't really brought anybody else in. So how could Cowboys fans, how could Jerry Jones, how could anybody go into next season thinking that this team got better or is taking a step in the right direction? It's a horrible offseason for them.
Yeah, and they're in a tough division, right? You have the Eagles, who just won a Super Bowl. They still have a decent team, and you have the Commanders, who are up and coming. Now the Giants are a whole issue. Them, with as their talent isn't there yet, but you have to kind of keep up with these other two teams, the Eagles and the Commanders, and they just didn't push the needle. They're going to have to work really hard in this draft to get the talent that they need.
Yeah, and I think this segues perfectly into my biggest loser, because I think they are constructing a very similar type of roster that the Dallas Cowboys are. And to me right now, the biggest loser so far is the San Francisco 49ers. And it's incredible that we have talked about the 49ers for the last 4 or 5 years as contenders every single year, right? They're in the NFC Championship game just about every year. They've been in the Super Bowl a couple of times. Kyle Shanahan can't quite get over the hump, but that's a team that you expect every year. They're scary. Every year they're competing. And now, for the first time, Shovit, I think since the Shanahan era, they're at a massive crossroads. You are getting rid of basically all of your players. Deebo Samuel traded to the Commanders, right? Brandon Ayuk is still on that roster, but you just traded Jordan Mason. Christian McCaffrey, does he have any calves left to be able to play football? I don't know. So I really don't know. That injury is quite a concern. They lost Dre Greenlaw. They lost Javon Hargrave. They're losing everybody. On Travarius Ward is gone. So they're losing everybody. And here's the biggest kicker. They have Brock Purdy, whose contract's coming due, and they are contemplating paying him $50 to $60 million. So from a roster construction standpoint, how does it make sense that you are cutting all of your best talent, right? You have to get younger at some point. I totally get that. And those guys are aging, Greenlaw, Hargrave, Deebo. So I get you have to get younger, but how could you possibly think that cutting your talent when you're about to pay your young quarterback, who's, if you pay him, he's your franchise quarterback for the next 5 years. How are you expecting him to succeed with less talent? And oh, by the way, again, we just talked about your loser show at the Cowboys. This is the exact blueprint that you don't want to build. You don't want to pay a quarterback $60 million when he has no other roster, when he's not a quarterback that you think can even lift or propel a roster that is depleted. He is more so a guy that is a cherry on top to an already stacked roster. So it's just, to me, it's backwards. And to me, that's why, if anybody listened to our predictions on free agent quarterback episode, I talked about the 49ers could be in a position where they trade Brock Purdy. Because why? Like, explain to me, Shovit, your line of thinking as glass half full, or the other side here, of why the 49ers would pay Mr. Irrelevant $50 to $60 million a year when they're losing basically the rest of their entire roster.
I think the NFL is a hard business. It's so tough to be good for a long time. They had this small gap of the last maybe 4 or 5 years that they could have really won the Super Bowl, and hadn't it been for that Brock Purdy injury, the history may have been rewritten, but they missed it. And now, you have all these players that you were able to sign, that you were able to keep because of the fact that Brock Purdy was in this rookie contract and he was Mr. Irrelevant, didn't really get paid. And now you're going to have to pay him and still have a solid roster, right? And that's going to be really tough. So the other side of this is that maybe this is just what needs to happen. It's a cycle, and you have to lose. You just have to go back to the drawing board and start fresh, which brings up the conversation that we had previously. Well, what do you do with Brock Purdy? And, the hard answer to that is to let him go and find another talent, which is tough to do. And I think that they're just in this point where, all right, well, our players know that we missed the chance. They're going to go and try to get paid, because Super Bowl probably isn't an option. Last year was that push to get that Super Bowl, and they couldn't do it. And so now they're just back to the drawing boards, I think, is where they're at with the 49ers.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it just these names, like, you think about these names that they lost, and they're all names you've heard of. Deebo Samuel, wide receiver, gone. Guard, Aaron Banks, gone. Cornerback, Travarius Ward, gone. Linebacker, Dre Greenlaw, gone. Safety, Talanoa Hufanga, gone. Defensive tackle, Javon Hargrave, gone. Defensive end, Leonard Floyd, gone. Defensive tackle, Malik Collins, gone. I mean, that is almost all staples on their team that are gone. Now, awesome. They brought back Kyle Juszczyk, so congrats that they're going to try to somehow continue to fortify the fullback position that 99% of the teams in the NFL have already deemed obsolete. So it's really, really just a massive head scratcher, right? Like, you lose Deebo, you bring in DeMarcus Robinson. He's a shittier receiver. There's no doubt about it. You lose Travarius Ward, you bring in Trey Brown, shittier cornerback. You lost Aaron Banks. You brought in, you haven't brought in a guard, actually, and you brought in linebacker Luke Gifford to replace Dre Greenlaw. Again, every name you brought in is like a great value, shittier version of a really good player that you lost. So naturally you're taking a step back. I mean, let's talk. You talk about why they were able to construct their roster the last 4 years. In 2022, Brock Purdy's cap hit shove it was $725,000.
There you go.
In 2023, $889,000. 2024, his cap hit was $1 million. So this year, the final year of his contract, his cap hit is still only $5.3 million. But you talk about it. Next year, they're going to go into a situation where unless they backload that contract, he's going to start to get massive cap hits. And if you have the opportunity where he's still under contract this year and he's cheap, like could the Pittsburgh Steelers, could the Giants, could a team, the Titans, could a team like that last minute be like, hey, we don't, like, if we're not in on Cam Ward, if we don't have a chance to get Cam Ward, we're not in on Shedeur where he's at. We're not in on XYZ Jackson Dart where he's at, right? Could they trade for Brock Purdy knowing that this year he's still damn cheap, and then you can work out a contract to where you can backload it, and in 25, 26, maybe 26, 27, he's still relatively cheap. I mean, would you, as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, call up the 49ers and try to make a trade for Brock Purdy?
I would not. I've seen enough throws that are inaccurate, and I think that he's a system quarterback that works well in that Kyle Shanahan offense, and that was great for them. I think that right now is like when you go and trade Brock Purdy, with the talent that you have on offense and your team as a whole, you got to think that he's going to regress next year. And at that point, he might not be as lucrative, but then you can just, maybe just release him. And maybe that's the route that they take. But if you're going to trade and get some capital for Brock Purdy, I think now is the time that you do that. But if I was Steelers, no, I would not go out to get Brock Purdy.
It's scary, man. You cannot be paying middle of the pack quarterbacks top tier money. Dak, you just can't do it. It is a recipe to not be successful, to not inevitably win a championship. So I agree with you here. Real quick, I think you and I had a couple of overlaps in terms of winners and losers. One other team each we want to discuss. A winner for me, Shovit, and I think you would agree, the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders, a team that went to the NFC Championship last year on the back of Jaden Daniels, rookie quarterback, fantastic season, one of the best rookie quarterback seasons we've ever seen. So what do? They go out and they try to make sure that they make life for him better. So last year, Terry McLaurin saw one of the most efficient touchdown scoring seasons of a receiver I've ever seen relative to the targets he was getting and the catches total that he had, right? And their number 2 receiver was who? De'Ami Brown, Noah Brown. Like they would have random guys, Curtis Samuel, randomly running around and making plays. They brought in old man Jamison Crowder again. So they never really had a clear wide receiver 2. We talked about the 49ers being losers because they shipped Debo. Well, where do they ship him to? They shipped him to the Commanders. And for the Commanders, that's a massive win. You have a receiver that is such a good complement to TMC because he does everything that TMC doesn't do, right? Screen passes, get balls in the backfield. He's over the middle. TMC is running these go routes and running these vertical plays, and Debo Samuel is doing all the short intermediate stuff. So I really like it. They lose Austin Eckler, so you can line up Debo in the backfield and run with him. Brian Robinson's on a final year of his contract, so there's a world where, again, he's gone, and they look at potentially drafting a running back here to pair with Robinson in the draft, and that would just add another offensive weapon for Jaden Daniels. And then on top of that, Shovit, what's the most important position for a quarterback? His blind side. They brought in Laramie Tunsil. So I don't know why. I don't know why the Houston Texans traded away Laramie Tunsil, but they traded him to the Commanders, and he's one of the best tackles in the NFL. So now you're protecting Jaden's blind side. You've got him another weapon. Those are 2 of the most integral positions for a quarterback to be successful. You brought back Zach Ertz, who was such a reliable safety blanket for him, another year. You brought back Noah Brown so he can play a wide receiver 3 role for you. So again, those I think are really, really important things that they did. They brought back Bobby Wagner on the defensive end. They signed Javon Kinlaw. So, they're bringing in veteran presences on the defensive side to kind of piggyback with some of the young offensive nucleus players that they have. So, it's a really good mesh of veterans and young players. And so, outside of maybe taking best player available, running back, edge, cornerback, or interior offensive line, they are also coming into this season where they don't have a ton of weaknesses, and they just had a rookie quarterback have a fantastic season and take them almost to the Super Bowl. So the 2 main headline pieces of getting Debo and Laramie Tunsil alone, to me, makes the Commanders winners this offseason. Shovit, I don't know what your thoughts are there.
No, I agree. I mean, they get a solid A grade for me. When you have the key re-signings like the Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, and so you just kind of set yourself up for success in the draft as well. And then you go out and get Debo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, Jonathan Jones, Javon Kinlaw. I think all of these are going to bode well for the Commanders, and I like it. I like what they did this free agency.
Yeah, again, really, really hard not to like what they did, considering how they overshot their expectations last year. And then if you try to extrapolate that on progressing or getting better, yeah, sky's the limit for that team, especially with Jaden Daniels at the helm. And then the final loser, the team that traded away Laramie Tunsil to this team, inevitably, we have to talk about it. What in the world are the Houston Texans doing this offseason, Show it?
Yeah, it's terrible. I think that they are looking at their offensive line and saying that wasn't it. So they're just basically starting fresh. And, the one good thing is that they go out and get CJ Gardner-Johnson. And so that's plus for them. And they also did get Laken Tomlinson, but I don't think they pushed the needle far enough. Instead of focusing more on the offensive line, more on the defensive line, they go out and get, sign Christian Kirk, CJ Gardner-Johnson, some of these positional players. And I don't think that's a recipe for success. They're probably going to still be competitive, but still not going to be a threat in the playoffs, in my opinion. They're still the best team in that division. However, I don't see them making that push, and just didn't do enough, in my opinion.
No, I mean, 2024, this offensive line ranked 29th per PFF, right? So they were one of the worst in the NFL. One of the only bright spots of that offensive line was Laramie Tunsil. What do? Ship him. So the one good spot about my offensive line, my tackle, my blind side for my future franchise quarterback, CJ Stroud. What are we going to do? We traded him away. Okay, that's fine. So you traded away your left tackle, right? And then you have guard Shaq Mason, who, again, he's a middle of the pack guard. He's been around for a while, but he wasn't the reason your offensive line was as porous as it was. And you traded him away. Not you didn't trade him away. You released him, right? And then you had your first round, I think second year, Kenyon Green, third year maybe. So first round guard that they drafted just a couple years ago has not panned out for them. Arguably was 76th out of 77th per PFF in offensive grade for a guard position. So pretty much one of the worst. They traded him away. So that sounds like that's a good thing, right? Let's cut the worst part of our offensive line. That sounds great, but who did they bring in, Shovit, to replace this man? Okay. So they got rid of Kenyon Green, who was awful. He gave up the third highest one-on-one pressure rate at the guard position, right? The third highest. So you're like, okay, third highest. That's really fucking bad. So hopefully, as long as they don't bring in first or second, they obviously progressed. Well, Shovit, do I have the story for you? They brought in the number one 1v1 pressure allowed guard in the NFL to replace this guy in Ed Ingram. And not only that, they traded a 6th round pick to the Vikings to get this man. So I am just completely dumbfounded at the logic behind this. Maybe they feel like he's a reclamation project that wasn't a good fit for the Vikings that they could turn around. But when your first round guard was so bad that you traded him away, what makes you believe that a 6th round guard that obviously hasn't already panned out for the Vikings? I think they drafted him in the 3rd, but a 3rd round guard who hasn't panned out for the Vikings, who's been as bad, if not worse, would be better for you. So, and then you mentioned Laken Tomlinson. He's not bad either, but he's actually 4th in the NFL in one-on-one pressures allowed at the guard position, Shovit. So they lost number 3, but they got 1 and 4. So tell me, do you think they actually got better, or process of elimination, they actually got worse and Stroud's going to have less time now to throw?
Yeah, I think the latter. I think he'll have less time to throw, and it's unfortunate, but you know what? Maybe, a different group and a restart, and we'll work better as a team than one-on-one. That's the only thing I can get out of this, but no, I don't think it's good.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. He was the 2nd highest sacked quarterback last year, 52 sacks. And again, I said the 29th graded offensive line per PFF, and they got worse. So I am very, very scared for the Houston Texans. I think their first round pick almost exclusively has to be an offensive lineman, I think, without a doubt. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're double dipping, triple dipping in the offensive line in the trenches in the draft. But as of now, they have to be one of the losers. Their biggest weakness, they addressed it by making it worse. So it's just a really, really big head scratcher for me. Anybody else? I think that's all the ones that I had in terms of winners and losers. Any other players, teams, transactions that you wanted to highlight real quick?
Sure. I think this goes out without having to be said, but Falcons, I think, are one of the losers. Just the whole Kirk Cousins fiasco, right? You don't release him or trade him, and now you have to pay him a $10 million bonus. He has a $40 million cap hit. His dead money in terms of cap is $75 million. And so it's just, what are you doing? He's not going to be a backup quarterback for the Falcons. And you got to try to do whatever you can financially as a team because Michael Penix is the guy. He's the guy that's going to get the start.
No doubt.
No question. Unless he gets injured, there's no way Kirk Cousins is going to be out there. So, and they didn't do anything on defense to make their defense better. They lose Grady Garrett. And that's a very important piece of their puzzle there. So, when you still have Cousins, you don't do anything to make your team better on the defensive side. What are you doing as a team? So in terms of free agency, not so good for the Falcons.
Yeah, in an era where all the time, right? Quarterbacks are so sought after. Somebody probably would have given you something for Kirk Cousins. Now, the problem here lies in that Kirk Cousins himself's contract is always dealt with some sort of no trade clause or a void, or to where he has to approve a potential trade to another team. So he's kind of getting in his own way here for the first time, where, it was all rainbows and unicorns because he had guarantees, no trade clauses everywhere he went. So the cards were in his hands. And then all of a sudden the Falcons said, you know what? We're not going to put the cards in your hands because we're going to draft a quarterback who's going to play now. So now if you want to play, you have to facilitate getting off of this team. And if he's not willing to do that, then yeah, he's going to have to sit as a backup. That sucks for the Falcons, but the way his contract structured is they are going to eat that dead cap and that cap hit beyond this year if they keep him, and then they probably just cut him after this season. So it's very unfortunate. It's crazy the way that roller coaster from like a Kirk Cousins standpoint would have been, right? You're ascending. You got paid massive amounts of money from the Vikings. You took them to the playoffs. All of a sudden you're like, this is my payday. I'm going to make more money. And then you get paid from the Atlanta Falcons. That's where your wife is from. You get to go home and retire there, finish out your career. Boom. They take a quarterback 8, you tear your Achilles, and the rest is history. So you can't ever blink in the NFL. Show it. It's like your job is never safe. Something can happen and the tables will turn that quickly on you. But yeah, right now, don't address the defense, and you still have a really, really, really expensive backup quarterback on your roster. It doesn't make sense. So maybe we can talk to D-Roger, get him on the podcast, and just have him just unload all of his feelings at us, because that would really tell us how Falcons fans really feel. But that is all we have, man. It's been a jam-packed offseason. Just so exciting. The phone just never stops buzzing, pinging, notifications. I got every single notification on from every NFL insider on Twitter. So it's just like constant. So it's really annoying having to hear 7 different guys tell us that Aaron Rodgers wants to be a Viking when I know the Vikings don't want Aaron Rodgers. So I'm really hopeful that your Steelers hurry up and make this, get this deal done so that we can put the Aaron Rodgers rumors to bed.
It's not even the Steelers. It's Aaron Rodgers. I think he's just being a little baby and he won't sign the contract.
Narcissism.
It's alive and well in Aaron Rodgers' head. So it's him himself. I hope it's not the Steelers as well, man. I don't want a 40-year-old quarterback, but I don't make the decisions. I don't get paid there. So it's all good.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. It'll be interesting to see that. And then Russell Wilson, that's going to help domino affect everything else in the offseason. And then again, we'll be here to cover it. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're watching, hit the like, hit the subscribe. It helps spread the word. Socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, @TheOnlyPlaybook. I'm Sweetcar. That's Shovit. See ya.